welcome back to this session. We got tea and coffee served just to save some more time. And now I think one of the most exciting session of the day. We have excellent panel for you arranged here, and I'm sure you would find it very interesting, both the groups, NYU and Science Diplomacy, because several overlaps you see, and the three gentlemen whom we are seeing here, each one is representing a different domain knowledge completely. And as we did in the first session in the morning, we had three persons from three different streams. This is also a panel of similar nature. On my first left here is Dr. Sanjay Baru. Dr. Sanjay Baru is an important voice in Indian industry and in Indian academics, media. Dr. Baru is right now Secretary General of Federation for Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, where he joined recently. He has been editor of India's major financial newspapers, the Economic Times, Financial Express, Business Standard. He was Professor of Economics at University of Hyderabad, Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations, ICRIER, and Lee Kuan Yew's School of Public Policy, Singapore. Dr. Baru has been media advisor to our Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, from 2004 to 2008, and director for Economics and Strategy, International Institute of Strategic Studies, London. He was member, National Security Advisory Board of India, India ASEAN Eminent Persons Group, and the Indian National Defense University Committee. Dr. Sanjay Baru will also be talking to us today on broad issues, particularly related to economics and trade. He also brings in this unique expertise of how he is viewing the changing policy landscape in this country. We have requested him to speak on that. Next to him is our voice on, and that's the reason why in the title of the program you find the word democracy. That's Dr. S.Y. Qureshi. He was appointed as the Chief Election Commissioner as the successor of Mr. Naveen Chawla in 2010. He has also served as Secretary to the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports. He is known for articulation of new policies that CEC initiated in terms of making it more electoral friendly. He would be speaking on some of those dimensions. He has also been one who has taken out India's experience in managing elections to other democracies. So our request to him was to highlight that experience of how India is trying to connect. Of course, science and technology plays an important role in that. The electoral machines play an important role in that. But definitely he would be bringing in sort of expertise on that. Next to him is RIS Distinguished Fellow, and we have great privilege in always having Dr. Rajiv Kher with, in any panel. He has been one of the major voices in India on multilateralism. He has worked with our Ministry of Commerce and Industry, both as Joint Secretary, but also as Secretary to that. He has been Chief Negotiator through several rounds in WTO, and right now as our Distinguished Fellow, he is leading our work program on trade. So as you can imagine, absolutely fantastic insight on this side of the table. What I have requested them is to speak for 8 to 10 minutes, and then, as we have been doing since morning, more interactive, so please be ready with your questions, and I'm sure it would be extremely interesting. Only thing I have promised them is that we would free them by 5:20, 5:30. So it would not be very long, but definitely I'm extremely grateful to all three of them for sparing their valuable time and joining us here. So warm welcome to them. I would first request Dr. Sanjay Baru to give his insights. You would like to speak?
Thank you, Sachin, Mr. Qureshi, Mr. Kher, and friends. I've seen the program that you've gone through during the day. I hope I'm not going to waste your time repeating some of the things that have been said. Since Mr. Qureshi is going to speak on democracy and Mr. Kher on trade, I thought I'll speak on economy and give you an idea of where we are. How many of you are in India for the first time? Clearly more than half. Good, because one doesn't know at what level to pitch in 8 to 10 minutes a set of telescopic comments. My comments will be aimed at provoking questions. So I won't have all the answers, but you ask the questions and then I'll try to answer. The first thing to understand about India is that I think the two phrases that have defined India over the last half a century are a phrase coined by a former US ambassador to India, John Kenneth Galbraith, who called India a functioning anarchy. That was Galbraith's description of India, and I think it has always stood up to that reputation. We remain a functioning anarchy. So there's much that happens that one would expect should happen, and much that doesn't happen that one would hope would happen. And we who have been born here and live here are quite used to it. Some years ago, the Minister for Youth Affairs in Singapore said to me, and I don't know how many of you have been to Singapore, it's one of those city-states that's regarded as the world's most disciplined and functioning system. And the Minister for Youth Affairs in Singapore said to me that his biggest worry in Singapore was the fact that there is now an entire generation of young people who were born into an already functioning society. In other words, a society that works like clockwork. Kids get up in the morning, switch on the light comes on. They go into the washroom, open the tap, there's water. They go to the bus stand at 8:20 to catch their school bus, and the bus arrives at 8:20. That is Singapore for you. A completely efficient, predictable lifestyle. And the minister said to me that what worries me about all these young people is how would they survive in a world of uncertainty? And then he went on to add, I am actually thinking of suggesting to all our schools that at some point they should send all these kids to India and spend a week living in a place where when you switch on the light may not come on. When you open a tap, there may be no water. You go to the bus stand, there may be no bus. In other words, a country in which all of us deal with uncertainty. And I think the important thing about a functioning anarchy is that we constantly live in the two worlds of predictability, certainty, uncertainty, failure. And that is what makes most of us resilient. We know how to deal with a situation where there is electricity, but if the power were to go off, I could still speak to all of you without worrying, though it's possible that some of you might feel a bit flustered that the power went off and some guy is speaking in the dark, and it's not a new it's a new experience, right? The second remark about India that was made by another economist, incidentally Galbraith was the US ambassador here, but an economist, and I too am an economist. The second most perceptive remark that was made about India was made by another economist, a lady called Joan Robinson from the University of Cambridge in the UK, who said once that every statement about India and its opposite is true. In other words, we are a land of opposites. We are a land of several billionaires, a land of millions of people living in poverty. It's a country in which you have some of the most advanced information technology institutions and companies, and we have agriculture which still depends on animal power, buffaloes for tilling the land. It's a country that lives across centuries. I would imagine that if you take the livelihood of Indians, you could probably span 500 years. There are people today who still live in the way most of us lived 500 years back. And there are still people who live today who are already in the 21st century. They have electrical cars, they have robots at home, they have smart power. You walk into a room, the lights switch on, that. So it's a modern lifestyle along with a very primitive lifestyle. And therefore it's a land of extremes. And so I never talk about India because there is no one India. There are many Indias. And if you travel around this country, it's like traveling across Europe. You have Greece, you have Germany, you have Estonia, you have Latvia, you have France, you have Poland, you have Sweden, you have Italy. It's a complex nation of many cultures, religions, languages, cuisines, dresses. And that's what makes it in many ways unique. And what makes all of this truly unique is the fact that we've been a democracy for more than 60 years now. And Mr. Qureshi will talk about that. No other developing country has survived as a democracy continuously for a period of 70 years with this level of cultural, political, economic diversity and complexity. They've gone through ups and downs. There are many countries that have not even become democracies. But the attempt of this country to grow, to become a modern economy, given all this complexity, makes it very unique. So in many ways, India is sui generis. It's very important to recognize that. It's different from many other parts of the world. There are some other countries which are probably equally diverse internally, but not in all aspects of life. The second set of numbers I will throw at you and leave it at that is that if you look at India's growth experience over the last 100 years, from 1900 to 1950, for an entire 50 years before we became a free nation, our economy grew at the rate of 0%. That was the average rate of growth, annual average rate of growth from 1900 to 1950, based on the data we have, 0%, which means for 50 years, there was just no growth. It was also the 50 years of the wars, the two wars in which millions of Indians also went and fought in Europe and all over the world and died. We had famines, we had major natural disasters. We survived all that, became a free nation in 1947. After which, for 30 years, our economy has grown at 3.5% per annum from 1950 to 1980. From 1980 to 2000, we grew at about 5.5%. And then from 2000 to now, we've been growing around 6.57%. That's the kind of average number. So 0, 5.5, sorry, 0, 3.5, 5.5, 6 to 7 in the last decade. Which is what gives us optimism, that we see ourselves as an economy on a rising curve with its ups and downs. Right now, we are a bit down. We enjoyed 10 years of 8% growth from 2003 to 2012. And then in the last 4-5 years, we've been down. This year has been particularly bad. But in spite of all these ups and downs, it's a long-term rising curve. And I'll end with the last remark, which is that while there is optimism that we are growing, that we are likely to grow, that this growth rate can be sustained, that maybe 10 years from now we'll be the 5th largest economy in the world, 20 years from now we would be the 4th largest economy in the world, 30 years from now will be the 3rd largest economy in the world. And all these projections that are made by the World Bank and various other organizations basically suggest that by around 2050, China will be number 1, United States will remain number 2, and India will be number 3, right? That's kind of long-term into the future, provided the world doesn't disappear after Kim Il-jung drops a bomb. But, forget about the long distance. I think in the immediate term, we have a lot of problems, and any government has to deal with a range of these problems. And so the growth process will be 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. That's the way in which this. We are not like China that for 20 years had 8 to 10% growth year on year. That's never going to happen in India. I don't see that happening. But this is a country that's rising on a growth trajectory. But our real problem is that our growth process, unlike that of China, which began in the 1970s, and ours began in the 1990s, is coming to a head at a time when the international system is in crisis. China benefited from the fact that it opened up to the West, to the United States, to Europe, exported to those countries, gave you all huge trade deficits because of which you elected Trump. And China is a country that has benefited from the West. We are growing at a time when the West is becoming inward-looking, protectionist, worried about jobs in the United States, in Western Europe, in Japan. So in a sense, and that is a subject on which Mr. Kher will speak, the global trading system, which is becoming increasingly insular. And that poses the biggest challenge, in my view, for India's growth in the future, that how do we continue to grow at a time when the global system is not growing as fast as it did and is unlikely to grow as fast as it did. I think my 8 to 10 minutes are done. I'll stop.
So I would now request Dr. Qureshi for his remarks. You would like to use the power.
Thank you very much, my colleagues here and my friends on the other side of the table. This presentation was made by me in Columbia the University last March. I came to New York twice in February and March, to Boston and to Columbia University for their keynote address on India Day. And of various presentations I have on the subject, I thought this was the closest to the subject of this event. So allow me to speak from here. I won't be as short as Sanjay ji, but will be quite disciplined. How do you move this? Now, Sanjay Baru said that India is a land of uncertainty and you can be sure or maybe not sure that electricity will come or not. Actually, it's very wrong to say that Delhi doesn't get electricity. It has already come 8 times since morning. Now, we are talking of India's democracy. We have just completed 67th year actually, because the election started in 52. We have conducted 16 general elections to Lok Sabha, Parliament, and 400 general elections to the provincial assemblies. We have never missed the deadline. That's the important thing, which is what Mr. Baru was also referring to. As a result, worldwide we have got acclaim. For instance, Barack Obama called it an example of all of us, for all of us. Hillary Clinton described it as gold standard. Then we are the most diverse country in the world. We have almost every religion here, 22 official languages, 200 developed languages, and regionally, mountains which are snow-covered all the time, and then deserts, and then islands, and you are in India, you have the world. And in such a diverse situation, when we talk of diversity, it is not just religious diversity, but linguistic, ethnic, cultural, and we have to ensure that no intimidation is allowed. Every single person, the last person, has an opportunity to vote without fear. So pluralism is our abiding identity. and there is enough legal and constitutional protection to that. Since we have to ensure that elections are inclusive, we have to make sure that all the minority, the biggest minority, by the way, is women, who have lots of discrimination, and we have to ensure that they vote fearlessly. We have to ensure the facilities for the disabled, 1 million polling stations, and we have to provide a ramp just for one day for the polling station. And we have been illiterate friendly from day one. Along with the name of the candidate, we provide a symbol which you can recognize and vote. And not very long ago, 4 or 5 years ago, we received a representation from the transgender community that they were not able to vote because the form says you ask for your gender, male or female. There was no third gender. Believe me, it took us just 1 minute to create a third gender. We said we call you other, O, M, F and O. And about 3-4 million people got empowered in one stroke. 4 years down the line, Supreme Court also gave a judgment, and that task probably became easier because we had already done it and demonstrated that it is possible. The last election was the largest election in world history. Actually, every Indian election has been the largest election in world history. Now, if you see the last election figures, 834 million voters. Next election, 2019, next year, will be 1 billion voters. And we have about 1 million polling stations. We have about 1.8 million electronic voting machines. 11 million are our poll personnel. And they're all government servants because we would not trust anyone except the government servants. And we expect zero error election from them. When I say zero error, that's what we mean. For us, 99% good election is not a good election. It has to be 100% good election, because even if 1% is left out because of our inefficiency or intimidation, there is a failure and it is going to affect the result. Because one vote, power of one vote is what I have also tried to demonstrate through my book and presentation. If we have more voters than all countries of Europe put together, or 54 countries of Africa put together, or North and South America, or the entire Commonwealth, even all of them together, they become only 60%. We have 90 countries rolled into one. And we have the complexities and problems of 90 countries all in India, and we have to deal with them. And despite all that, we conduct elections which are event-free. A good election is no longer news for us. A bad election would be, and we are very careful not to allow such a headline to come. When we talk of complexity, the remoteness of various locations, how they travel, sometimes the polling party has to physically walk 3 days and 3 nights to reach the polling station. How we have, despite 1 billion voters, we have a polling booth for just one voter in Gir forest of Gujarat, which is famous for Asiatic lion. He's a temple priest. For him, we send a polling party of 6 people. Previous night, they set up the polling station, wait for him the next morning to come whatever time he chooses. Last time he came at 2:30. We wait, and even after he had voted, we cannot close the shop. Why? Because somebody may come till 5 o'clock and say that he was a bogus voter, I'm the voter, real voter. So for a dispute to arise, we keep the thing open, and we are very proud that we have kept this single voter booth. Now, this is not just imaginary, how one voter can make all the difference. In 2008 or 9 in Rajasthan, you must have heard of Rajasthan state, the president of the Congress party there was a potential chief minister candidate. He lost by 1 vote. When he was losing, he called up the returning officer, said, can you recount the postal ballots? There were 500 postal ballots because machine, you don't have to recount every time you press the button, same result. So 15 minutes, same result. He rang up a second time. Sir, can you retabulate the totals coming from the machine? Maybe there is a human error there. And he said, all right, I'll do that. Same result. Third phone call was to thank the returning officer, the trust. He knew he lost because of the voters. Now, the side story here was that his wife had not voted. So when I heard about this, I called up Mr. Joshi. His name is Mr. C.P. Joshi. Later on became central minister. And I asked him whether this story is correct. He says it is. And he said that day his wife and daughter had in an instant gone to a temple. Now here we have three morals of this story. One, every vote counts. Two, you can't take even your family for granted. I didn't say wife because then it would be called something. Third, on the day of the poll, the most important temple is the polling station. That's a lesson for every politician. So that's why we have to ensure that every vote gets cast and gets counted, and so on. So to make sure that the elections are peaceful, we keep on learning all the time. That is one of the secrets of our success. We develop vulnerability mapping in every village. For every district, we have a thick plan. Now, in one village, who are the people who have criminal background? What is their father's name, grandfather's name? What offenses they were committing? Who is the target of their attack? And all that. We keep a complete record and we take preventive action. Then we have enough provision for checking intimidation, violence, and fraud. We have perfect communication system to the last booth, wherever it is. That itself is a very interesting success story. There are lots of science people here. Maybe in Q&A I can tell a little bit about that. But the fact that we have perfect communication, if you see the last bullet, it is a deterrent for the troublemaker. Because they know nothing will be hidden from the eyes of the Election Commission. So therefore they behave. EVMs, we call the wonder machine of democracy. It is under attack in India and everywhere in the world, all time. Unfortunately, America is the most quoted. Look, even America is not using machines. Why do you use it? As if America is the standard against which every development should be tested. I would say that in many ways we are superior to America. To give you two examples, we gave equal voting rights to women on day one. America took 144 years. We gave a woman prime minister in 19 years. You have failed to give a woman president in 240 years. Now tell me who has to learn from whom. Then the model code of conduct is one of the most interesting features. It's a voluntary code of conduct given to themselves by the political parties for good behavior. They will not disturb each other's meeting, no hate speech, no personal attack, and so on. That is what is keeping elections peaceful and clean. Perhaps the most important feature is the checks on the party in power. We totally emasculate the ruling party, the government. Or, incumbency advantage is made zero. Virtually, the Election Commission takes over. They cannot even take a decision. They cannot even discuss a subject and take advantage. Look, we are planning such lovely scheme for you, but for this Election Commission, we won't even allow that to happen in the cabinet. So you can't use public transport, any communication, the staff and things. So that ensures level playing field. Which is why the ruling party which appoints us very soon starts hating us. Opposition loves us, ruling party hates us. And when the same ruling party becomes opposition, then they change their mind. We use technology, all kinds of technology, high technology, the latest in everything except in EVM, where by a conscious decision we use 17th century technology of an elementary calculator, which also maybe I'll explain if there is a question. However, having said all the good things, there are some issues of concern. One, that the role of money power is really almost out of hand. Then there is criminalization of politics. People with serious criminal cases pending against them are winning election. Almost 1/3 of the MPs have criminal cases pending against them, and also legislators in the states. Then the urban and youth voter apathy has been a problem which we have dealt with very, very substantially. Then voter education. Now, I have some communication background. My PhD was also in communication. When I joined the Election Commission, when I saw that in some state cities, the voter turnout was just about 20%, 25%, I said, we have to deal with this. I've encountered a lot of opposition. People said, voter education is not your job. Your job is to conduct the elections. I said, no, it is very much our job, because when there is low turnout, if somebody comes to power with only with 10% vote, an MLA or MP, 90% people have not voted for him, his legitimacy comes into question. Therefore, turning voter turnout has to be addressed by us. We set up a voter education division in 2010. Every election thereafter has given us historic turnouts, record turnouts. Then between just 2 elections, we had added one South Africa and 1 South Korea together, or 3 Canadas, 4 Australias, 10 Portugal, and 20 Finlands were added only in 5 years. This similar will be the addition by the next election. Resurgent youth and women. We targeted our voter education on women and youth particularly, and there is also how we use important sportsmen, actors, president, former president as our icon, and it helped a lot. Then we addressed gender gap. The gender gap in voter turnout was about 10 percentage point between men and women. We have brought it down to 1.4, and we hope that by the next election it will be 0. New media is making a lot of difference. Last election was considered as the first social media election in the world. BJP led the way, but other parties are now catching up too. We are always innovating, as I said. None of the above was introduced recently. Voter verifiable paper audit trail has been introduced recently. Next election will be entirely with VVPAT. Last 2 elections last month were with VVPAT, etc. Then green election. We didn't even realize till one speaker in one of our functions pointed out that we have green elections. Because of electronic voting machines, we save 11,000 tons of paper each time. For manufacturing that paper, we would have cut 280,000 trees. We save every time. We save so much of water which would go into making of the paper, and so much of money. Then we control noise reduction. No loudspeaker after 10 p.m. till 6 a.m. Decibels are controlled. Speech, where you can give speeches. No loudspeaker outside hospitals or schools and so on. Defacement of all property, totally banned. Petrol, there used to be cavalcades of 1,000 cars. We have restricted it to not more than 10 cars. So petrol pollution has come down. Plastics are totally banned. And none of these, incidentally, is an election law. These are normal laws of the land which are normally flouted, as Mr. Baru mentioned, chaotic country that India is. But we ensure total discipline. Now, this is the kind of newspaper headlines which are normal. Now, the international, now New York Times had said it is truly the greatest show on earth, an ode to a diverse and democratic ethos and inspiration to all the world. Then if you see the next one, this uses the language which Mr. Baru had used. India confirms its status as a democratic beacon, yet for this chaotic nation, with this almost unfathomable religious, linguistic and social diversity, not only to hold free and fair elections, but also to deliver a stable government is truly a remarkable achievement. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi used to talk about compulsory voting. And when I was the CEC, I said nothing doing, there was no question of compulsory voting. We will achieve what you want to achieve through voter education. And I'm very happy to say that 5 years later, Prime Minister may change his mind, and in his he addresses the nation through all media once a month, in which he praised the Election Commission that till a few years ago it was regulatory, now it has become totally citizen-centric. I think that this is the biggest compliment, and very sporting of the Prime Minister to change his mind and come out with a public appreciation. He has been talking of electoral reforms of all kinds, which we are working on. Now, rest is only pictures, Mr. Khair. I'm cutting into your time, but just these pictures, how the polling parties are going, the voters are going. These are the different modes of transport. These are not there just for effect. Now, for instance, in the deep forest, you can only go on an elephant back. In desert, you can only go on camel or helicopter or whatever it takes to reach there. That's what we use. Now, again, look at the disorderly queues, the enthusiastic women here. And in the last picture, you will see our former Prime Minister with whom Mr. Baru worked, and Mrs. Manmohan Singh. They are showing their finger on which there is a indelible ink mark so that he cannot go and vote on a second polling booth. Even the Prime Minister is not exempted. And you will notice from his